This morning, we are to have a talk by Christopher Denman on the subject of pastors within meetings, which I will be, and I'm sure others will be very interested in hearing. Christopher.
Right. Well, I'm going to talk, it's a bit, have you checked, has Patsy changed the view?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to have happened to my computer, which it normally would have done. Anyway, right, I thought I'd look a little bit at North Carolina Yearly Meeting of Friends, which Friends in North Carolina started in 1672 when William Edmondson and George Fox first visited the colony. Well, the first record that's been preserved is from 1680. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about what happened to Friends in North America, because for the first 150 years, they were very much like British Friends, and Friends traveled from here over there and there over here, and everything was going along fine. And then in America, there was a separation between a group that were called Hicksite, after Elias Hicks, who was a minister who emphasized the inner light. And there was a separation between people supporting him and people who are known as the Orthodox, who believed, gave more emphasis to the Bible rather than saying that the inner light overrode everything. So, I mean, and that was the type that British Friends stayed in contact with the Orthodox, whereas of course nowadays we're probably all Hicksites. Anyway, in North Carolina they didn't separate, so they stayed Orthodox, and then in the 1840s or 50s, Joseph John Gurney, brother of Elizabeth Fry, made a visit to America, and he was an evangelical friend. I think he had a good intellect, and I think he emphasized that. Anyway, there were then splits in America between this only happened in the Orthodox, because between ones who stayed as they were and ones who followed Gurney. You'll find with Quaker history that most of our schisms are named after people, because we do tend to idolize people, you know. It's why we all, you know, fall on our faces when Ray Bray walks into the meeting each Sunday, you know, because of valuing him as highly as we do. Right, so that was how North Carolina stayed. And then these Gurneyite yearly meetings got involved in the evangelical revival at the end of the 19th century in America, when lots of people got, you know, they had these big meetings in tents, and, you know, people spurred people on, and people, you know, found Jesus and, had these tremendous conversion experiences. Now, in a Quaker position, that this was slightly difficult because these friends were moving westward in America on the whole, but you were getting a lot of new people and not many people who've been with, born with friends. So it was actually difficult keeping things together. So some meetings introduced pastors, and I thought I'd just read the bit in here in their faith and practice in their historical statement, which talks about that. The development of the pastoral ministry during the later half of the 19th century was due to the growing demand for trained leadership. The change probably would have come eventually, but more slowly if it not been given the impetus given to it by the evangelical movement. Many were brought into membership by the revival meetings who had no experience in the practices and methods of the Society of Friends, nor any knowledge of their doctrines and tradition. In places, there were whole meetings with only a few birthright members, often converts in a series of meetings would join Friends merely because the preacher was a Quaker and they had no other denominational preferences. This called for a teaching ministry and for pastoral care, which such as had never been rendered in the traditional type of Quaker meeting with its system of distributed responsibility. It was natural, therefore, that the evangelist should be asked to remain in the community and devote his or her entire time to the ministry and shepherding the flock. The feeling against the paid ministry diminished, and references to it were omitted in revisions of the discipline. Definite employment and financial assistance were provided for ministers and evangelists who were called to serve as pastors. The meetings on ministry and oversight became also the pastoral committee and was given responsibility for selecting the pastor and supervising his work. These developments were obviously departures from the early practices of Friends, meeting as they did at the hour of worship in a silence that might continue through the hour, or that might be broken by one of several resident ministers or other members of the congregation. The change to the current form took place gradually, but not without regret and even opposition on the part of many. In some areas, the older forms still survive. I'd say there. So, right, I'm going to have a drink because then you might actually be able to hear what I'm saying. So that's how it started. Now I thought I'd read a couple of bits from their chapter 2, which is on faith and thought. Basic principles, declarations of faith. While we as Friends do not have a formal creed as the basis of membership, it has seemed wise from time to time to make some declarations of the fundamentals of our faith. Such a declaration was made, was the letter of George Fox to the governor of Barbados, which is included in part 3 of this volume. A more extended statement was the Declaration of Faith issued by the Richmond Conference in 1887, also included part 2. We desire at this time to call our own membership to a deeper religious life, a greater consecration of heart and will to God, and a more positive loyalty to the faith for which so many of our forerunners suffered and died. We affirm the statements of the above documents, which gather up and express the central truth with regard to the Son, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Scriptures, for which we stand now as in the past. And we urge all members to refresh their minds by a careful reading of these documents. Additional statements are contained in the paragraph following. They then talk about the meaning of salvation, which is obviously important to them, but I thought I'd skip that and read on to the living presence. Friends give special emphasis to the vital principle that man's salvation and higher life are personal matters between the individual soul and God. They recall that primitive Christianity was a spiritual society in which all members were priests and held direct communion with God. From the birth of the Quaker movement, Friends have regarded Christianity as essentially an experience and a way of life based on that experience. George Foxton, in describing the great spiritual transformation of his early life, declares, and this I knew experimentally. And then they quote Isaac Pennington and Robert Barclay. This intimate fellowship with God, the conscious of Christ as a living present, has run through the whole history of Quakerism as a warm, life-giving stream. A life led by the Holy Spirit is the logical outcome of a faith based upon belief in a direct personal approach to God. Nothing is more certain than that God is still speaking to men as he did in ancient time. His Spirit guides and controls the surrendered life, making sensitive the conscience, illumines the mind, and strengthens the will. The Christian's constant and supreme business is obedience to him. From the earliest days of and then it talks about the light of Christ. From the earliest days of their history, there are frequent references in the writing of Friends to the belief that there is in the human soul a light which is of divine origin and which makes men capable of response to moral and spiritual influence. It is this divine quality that enables him or her to develop the awareness of moral distinctions and obligations known as conscience, and inspires them to live, struggle, and suffer for the achievement of what ought to be. And then it is this spiritual endowment which enables him or her to advance beyond the narrow bounds of self towards the Christian ideals of goodness and love, and to respond to the power and inspiration of the Holy Spirit. George Fox often called this principle the seed of God, that of God in everyone, or the light within. It is that something we cannot call less than divine and universal, for it links up with the eternal realities and with our fellow men of whatever race or creed. It may be hidden or warped by ignorance or pride or self-will or prejudice, but it cannot be wholly lost. For it is part of what makes us essentially men and women made in the divine image, and having within us boundless possibilities of life in God. Now, yeah, I pulled out just a couple of bits in the thing to read out, and then I thought what I might do is you can say, well, what do they say about so-and-so? And I can see if I can find out for you. Appointment of officers. This is the monthly meeting they're talking about. The monthly meeting shall appoint a presiding clerk, a recording clerk, and such other officers as may be needed to expedite the business of the meeting and manage its affairs. It shall be the duty of the presiding clerk to see that the business is properly presented to the meeting for its consideration, to announce decisions when made, and to sign documents on behalf of the monthly meeting. The recording clerk shall keep an accurate set of minutes showing all matters brought to the attention of the meeting and the actions taken. These should be kept in permanent form in a minute book after they have been approved by the meeting. The minutes of each meeting must be signed by the clerk and recording clerk and dated correctly. The recording clerk or other designated person shall keep a current and correct record of all matters pertaining to membership, such as births, marriages, deaths, members joining by application, transfers of membership, etc. And then under committees, the monthly meeting shall appoint a nominating committee which shall function throughout the year. This committee should represent the interests of the entire monthly meeting. It shall make nominations for positions as directed by the monthly meeting. It should consult with the proposed nominees before presenting their names to the monthly meeting. Members of the nominating committee shall serve for a period of 3 years, 1/3 being appointed each year. Any member of the meetings may make additional nominations to the monthly meeting. Then, right, then these meetings on ministry and council, which we don't tend to have in Britain anymore. They used to have meetings of ministers and elders, but we stopped recording ministers about 100 years ago. And one of the things that I thought I'd marked, and of course now can't find, let's see if it's there. All right, yes, it's further on. Ministers, procedure for recording of ministers, so they still record ministers. Evidence of gift. When a member has spoken in the public ministry to the edification and spiritual help of the meeting, and has rendered such service in such a manner and afforded a basis for the formation of a judgment as to the nature of his or her gifts and calling, the meeting on ministry and council shall carefully consider where there is evidence of a gift in the ministry which should be officially recognized. So, in fact, their meetings can have resident ministers as well as pastors. And it says the monthly meeting on ministry and council should be composed of all elders and resident ministers. Pastors or those serving the meeting in a similar capacity shall be members of this body by virtue of their position in the meeting. The meeting on ministry and council should select one or more members of this body to serve as clerks who shall keep a written record of proceedings. Right. When a monthly meeting has made arrangements for a pastor to assist in the efforts to fill Christian mission, the meeting on ministry and council must not allow its own responsibilities in the life of the meeting to be neglected or diminished. A clear understanding of the work to be done cooperatively must be reached. When this is done, the pastor may expect the full support of the meeting on ministry and council in prayer, counsel, and cooperative efforts. The pastor may be provided a job description at the time the call is issued, clearly setting forth the pastoral responsibilities. So, what else is on? there's just one other bit that I've right, pastoral meetings, and it says the pastor in the meeting. Pastors should recognize the opportunity for public meetings in the meeting for worship. They should prepare themselves by careful, prayerful study to expound the scriptures, to awaken the consciences of those who hear, to inspire a longing for Christ, and to guide all the congregation, particularly young people and children, in the search for God and the Christian way of life. They should realize the value of silent worship and respect the privilege and responsibility of others to participate in the vocal ministry of the meeting. The pastor may be a member but not an officer of the monthly meeting. I did come across something. Yeah, anyway, I'll stop there and we'll move over to questions, or I can dip in and out and find other bits. So I suppose a brief summary is you can see that the language they use is more Christian than we tend to use nowadays. And there are, you know, certainly with regard pastors, something very, very different from what we do, but there are other aspects that are, you know, almost the same. Ooh. Angela.
I'm a member of Amnesty International, and they're very careful of the words that they use when referring to the species Homo sapiens. Yeah. They adopt the term humankind. And I think, personally, in the 21st century, that's perhaps a more encompassing word than the word that has been used historically, which as a woman, I find myself perhaps part of the 50% that is not man. So humankind, I think, is a very good word to describe Homo sapiens.
Yeah. Yes, this Faith and Practice is basically a work of 1947 with various changes made since, but you know, and I must admit, I do wonder, as I think I've come across in other pastoral meetings where they have, you know, separate meetings of women friends and men friends, and does seem to be a sexist division of responsibilities in some parts.
Mary?
Can you comment on the spread of pastoral Quakerism to Africa?
Right, yes. Its main after meetings became Gurneyite, some of them later became even more evangelical, and there are a lot of meetings in America now that call themselves the Friends Church. And because they came through this evangelical revival, evangelism is very important to them. I mean, it was with early Friends, you know, they were traveling all over the place, trying to convert people to their point of view on what being a Christian was. They did even travel to Constantinople to try and convert Muslims, and certainly Margaret Fell wrote quite a lot to Jews, trying to get them to convert as well. These missions, which, I mean, there used to be a British mission society, but we don't tend, well, it just doesn't happen, you know, we've become less and less evangelical, whereas the American uni meetings have been, and, you know, they've just sent people out to evangelize Africa and South America and converted a lot of people. And I think in Africa now, a lot of the people doing the evangelism are the so this is probably not politically correct, but that's not what I'm aiming for, is actually, you know, African friends who have been converted themselves. But you do, I mean, I know there was a little, well, there was a bit of a fuss years ago that because the African uni meeting, as well as being evangelical, I believe it's a cultural thing as well, that male homosexuality is, you know, not considered a good thing. People have said so in their epistles, and people have, you know, and they've not been happy about us, you know, agreeing to same-sex marriages, and we haven't been happy with them, you know, saying it's all wickedness. Yes, I don't know a great deal about evangelism in Africa, because I'm not terribly interested, but we could try asking Roger Sturge to speak on it, because I think he's got more knowledge than most local friends, or and of course Marion Liebman has worked with women friends in Africa on reconciling the, you know, the children who are kidnapped and taken away and made into fighters, and then end up coming home afterwards, and of course home doesn't really want them anymore. So yeah, so but that is the growth area of Quakerism at present. But I personally am not a believer in numbers counting, because I think I'm right, and you know, if everybody falls in line with me, it'll be fine. So,
Christopher, in America, what is the split between evangelist friends and what I suppose we in England would say other friends?
What do you mean number-wise?
I know you don't like numbers, but
no, I don't know, I think is the answer. I mean, it used to be easier to find this out. I mean, when the Hicksites split off from the Orthodox, the Hicksite were the biggest group, but in fact they declined, whereas the more evangelical groups have expanded. And I think that probably, you know, the decline actually ties in partly with what happened here, because they kept the, you know, rather, well, disastrous Quaker testimony of disowning people who married people who weren't Quakers. So, you know, numbers diminish over time. whereas the evangelical, you know, they might be disowning people as well, but they're going out and converting all the time as well. Whereas I realized a while ago that I'd be more embarrassed talking to people about being a Quaker than I am talking to them about being a gay man. And, you know, there's something obviously wrong with that. But I think a lot of us are very shy about our religious beliefs. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are, I think there are three main groupings of Friends in America. There are yearly meetings that belong to Friends General Conference, which is the liberal ones who came from Hicksite yearly meetings, although some yearly meetings have rejoined. So, and then there are ones like North Carolina who joined Friends United meeting, which was originally a 5 years meeting of getting together of pastoral friends. And then there's now, it was the Evangelical Friends Alliance, but I think they're now calling themselves Friends Churches. And I think one of the sad things about North Carolina Friends, because I went online to see if they'd updated their Faith and Practice, is that in recent years, the evangelical, more evangelical meetings have forced a separation in the yearly meeting, and the more evangelical ones have gone off and formed themselves into another branch of the Friends Church, and the more liberal ones haven't, I think, decided as yet what they, you know, what they're planning to do, because I think there are also independent groups of Quakers in America, often quite like us, that have grown up at university towns and things, and I think there's a group like that in North Carolina as well. But there is somewhere a very interesting map of America where you press various buttons and it lights up which Quaker meetings of which type are, you know, in places. Because I met some friends when the yearly meeting was at Bath. They came to Central for tea and coffee, and I was talking to them, and they said, I asked where they came from. They said Ohio, and I said, oh, you know, I think Ohio's got the biggest number of, you know, different lots of Quakers, and they were embarrassed because they were the latest separation. They just separated again. I think it was evangelical people forcing others out, because I think from what I saw in North Carolina, they were wanting people to actually accept George Fox's letters to the governor of Barbados and the Richmond Declaration as, you know, say that is what we believe, you know, basically accepting them as creeds.
If anybody goes to or went to Woodbrook, just inside the door of the library was that very picture of all the splits within the Quaker.
Yeah.
You remember it?
Yes, I've got a copy somewhere, but
it's quite extensive.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes, whereas we've only had little ones here, and they've kind of faded out. But of course here we live more compactly. And I mean, what people do in Bristol, if you haven't worked it out already, and I think most of you have, is that if you fall out with the meeting you go to, you just start going to one of the others. Right. Yes, I thought, yeah, one thing on membership I thought was interesting. Joining other bodies. If a member in good standing wishes to unite with some other denomination, the monthly meeting may issue a letter of recommendation to the church chosen by the member, whereupon membership with friends shall cease. So, don't do that here. And marriage, you've got a choice. You can either be married by the pastor or you can do it in the traditional Quaker way. And it's what I found interesting. Where is it gone? Somebody else ask a question because I can't find the bit I was looking for. Yes, I found the bit now. But on marriage, and it says throughout their history as an organization, Friends have provided a form of ceremony in keeping with the belief in the deep religious experience of marriage. And then they go on and talk about the way Quakers traditionally did it. Avoidance of undue haste, emphasis on the equality of the sexes, the responsibilities assumed by the monthly meeting, and the statement of the marriage vows by the contracting parties. You know, and then non-members can marry. And I think it's yes, if you're being married by the pastor, you can have these vows. Should we do them? We'll do the woman because they're the same. In the presence of the Lord and before these friends, I take thee, AB, to be my husband, promising with divine assistance to be unto thee a loving and faithful wife, as long as we both shall live. And then you can, if your memory is poor, get the pastor to do the bit. So he would say to, well, we'll do the man this time, to the man. AB, do you take DE, whose hand you hold, choosing her alone from all the world to be your wedded wife? Will you love her and comfort her, support and cherish her in sickness and in health, in prosperity and adversity, forsaking all others, remain faithful to her as long as you both shall live? And then all the groom's got to do is say, I do. So, I mean, fortunately, nobody's ever asked me to marry them. So I haven't had the worry of remembering the Quaker promises, which is, but I thought it was interesting how similar they are. And I mean, in the when the friends are doing it as we do it, you just get up and say, in the presence of the Lord and before these friends, I take the DE to be my wife's husband, depending on which one's saying it, promising with divine assistance to be unto thee a loving and faithful husband, wife, as long as we both shall live.
I think it might vary meeting to meeting. My daughter Iona married her wife Emma in Leeds, and we were all equal witnesses, and we all signed. And Iona and Emma have this wonderful, you know, declaration, which I think they wrote what they wanted to say, with all 100 of us signing. And because, you know, my surname's Dorset, I was one of the first, but it was quite equal, actually. We just queued up.
Yeah.
Ray, when you were saying that a third party can act as the minister, if you like, how would that be chosen in a meeting? How would he or she be chosen?
Well, I think a lot of it's done by advertising, and I think one of the problems they recognize in America is that the pastors tend to move between various denominations because you know, a lot of Quaker churches are very much like other congregational churches. Yes, they do. They do have a. Yeah, they have a certificate of marriage, and their ends, I think, very much like ours. And we, having been present at the solemnization of the said marriage, did as witness there to set our hands, and then the rest of the meeting signs. But I did notice that they're not keen on divorce.
I think the most interesting marriage we have had at Central was when Sam McNair, who was then the warden, married Lou. And the meeting started, and Sam came down the middle of the central meeting. We had chairs each side. He came down the middle of the central meeting with 2 dogs and a cat on his shoulder. And I leant over to Kate Cashmore, who was doing the scribing friend at that time, and said, "We are never going to see a wedding like this again."
Yes, yes, and it appears they've got more ways of leaving the meeting. You can resign, you can forfeit your membership. Your membership can be discontinued, it can be dismissed, or you discontinued, or you can be disowned. So
Where do you see American friends going, Christopher?
I don't know. Depends whether I got my glasses on, Ray. I think, you know, it's obviously, well, the fact that so many different strands survive and flourish, and I mean, they do jointly support the American Service Committee. I think there are a couple of things, which do service overseas, and the United Nations office. But a lot of them don't have, paid staff like we do, apart from their pastors. And I know one of the things I was reading when they, the yearly meeting was laid down in North Carolina was one of the things they had to do before they could do that was actually protect the pensions of the pastors who'd served in the past, because I assume they'd been using current income to pay, you know, the pensions. And of course, if you're losing a lot of your membership, you know, that's causes difficulty. So I think we won't have pastors. We've got enough, you know, enough trouble as we are. Mary.
How fundamental is the use of Quaker faith and practice to all these groups?
That's a good question, because you can, I think you can go online. There's a site where you can actually access most of the faith and practices of the yearly meetings. The ones that are like us do publish them in book form still. I mean, I've got a selection from Philadelphia, New England, New York, Pacific and North Pacific. And Intermountain, which I found interesting because that's got a quotation from Susan Rook Matthews in it, who, of course, is a member of Bedminster meeting, but she didn't know it was there. But they'd taken it from something she'd written. So, but yes, I mean, and they're all very, you know, they're very keen on peace and work hard on that. So, so perhaps I've emphasized more the differences rather than what's the same, but anyway, it's 5 to 12 and I believe in ending these meetings promptly. So I will shut up now and hand you back to Ray and Jeffrey.
Well, that phrase then, be careful what you write, because it may end up in somewhere like Timbuktu. It seems to be a comment of that type of thing. Well, thank you, friends, for your attendance, and thank you, Christopher, for a illuminating and very interesting talk.